Hello and welcome to this All Indians Matter in-depth limited series, Gandhi The Beginning. I'm Ashraf Engineer. Frustrated at being unable to make professional headway, Mohandas Gandhi hoped to obtain a job, a prime ministership or a judgeship. For that he would need powerful political backing, but the royalty was not as powerful as before, and gone were the days when people like Uttam Chand Papa and Karam Chand Papa could rise to such positions purely on the basis of their ability and moral strength. The princes now were completely dependent on the British political agent. Once earlier, Mohan had approached the agent regarding a case in which his brother Lakshmidas had been affected, but the agent had virtually thrown Mohan out of his office. Now again, Mohan needed the agent and he knew he would make no headway. But there was an inflection point around the corner. Mohan was about to discover that life changes on certain unexpected moments that seem not that important at the time but which determine the course of your entire life. He was about to take the first step in a journey that would lead to him becoming the father of the nation. Mohan's brother heard from a Memon firm in Porbandar that had built a vast business in South Africa. They needed a vakil or barrister for a year in a case in which £40,000 was at stake. When he discussed the case with Sheikh Abdul Karim Javeri, a partner at Dada Abdullah and Company, the firm in question, Mohan was told that his job would be to help the firm's lawyer manage the English correspondence. This was a clerk's job, not a barrister's, and Mohan was tempted to say no. But circumstances forced him to swallow his pride and accept. Had he not, who knows what shape Mohan's life and India would have taken. To tell us the story of Mohandas Gandhi in South Africa, we have again Tushar Gandhi, great-grandson of the Mahatma, an author and peace activist. This is the fourth part of the series, Gandhi The Beginning. Tushar, welcome.
Thank you, Ashraf. Thank you.
Tushar, the first sign of steel in Mohandas's character comes in the form of an incident in the courtroom. Dada Abdullah takes Gandhi to court, his first time there, and Gandhi is wearing a frock coat and a turban. The judge takes a look at him and asks him to remove the turban. Gandhi refuses and walks out. Tell us about the incident.
Ashraf, we need to go backwards a bit from here because, it always feels that after going to South Africa, the angst in Mohandas took root and he started responding defiantly to episodes. But this beginning happened in Saurashtra as a failed lawyer when he was trying to curry favor. The British agent for Saurashtra at that time was somebody with whom Mohan had a casual acquaintance in London. And they had been on fairly friendly terms. And so Mohan thought that even here that casualness would be extended to him, the friendship would extend to their meeting. But when he ended up in his office, he realized that the man had changed and now he was behaving like the British agent. And when Mohan tried to remind him of their familiarity and the friendship, he was snubbed, and as you said, he was thrown out. He was not only thrown out, but at that time there was a peculiar disciplinary action that they took against erring Asians or coolies, as they were mentioned, which they called as Lal Tambu. Lal Tambu meant that in the glaring midday summer heat, the punished man would be made to stand at attention in the open under the glaring sun for as long as it pleased the agent, and he was not supposed to stir till he was excused. And Bapu was humiliated like that, and in public view people would see, so Barrister Mohandas is in the Lal Tambu kind of thing. And when he was had to endure that punishment, he felt very humiliated. And he wanted revenge. He wanted to punish the agent, and he wanted to explore the possibility of suing him for defamation kind of thing. At that time, Firoz Shah Mehta was traveling through Kathiawar, and Bapu seeked out a time with him and went and briefed him and said, look, I have been insulted like this and I want redress and I want you to fight my suit. So Firoz Shah Mehta counsels him. He says, look, I don't mind fighting your suit, but you have to think. You're just beginning your career as a lawyer, and if you are going to practice in Saurashtra, you'll have to appear in front of, in this fellow's court. Most of your cases, civil cases, will be dealt with by him. and by this action you will turn him into a lifelong enemy. Can you afford to do that? And even if suppose you win and this fellow is removed from service, the person who comes will remember you as a troublemaker and they will be inimical towards you. He says maybe you will live through that punishment, but why do you want to inflict it on your clients? Because every case that you represent will be dealt with prejudice. So he says we all live with this humiliation. We just swallow our pride and go on. You've got to learn to swallow the bitter pill. And Mohan doesn't like it, but he accepts it as wise counsel. So when he goes to South Africa, that resentment is already in his mind. And then on the first day, when the judge very rudely tells him to take off the headgear, and when he refuses, he's thrown out of the courtroom. He says, what the hell? Why should I not be given the dignity that I deserve? And at that point of time, he has a big ego of being a British-trained barrister. There's a hierarchy in India. There are Indian educated lawyers and things, and then there are British educated barristers. And the British educated barristers are considered to be a status above the Indian conventional lawyers. And so, Mohandas Gandhi prides himself that he's a British educated lawyer, barrister. And so he says, how dare this judge treat me in this manner? And so a running dispute erupts between them. And that is where Mohan not only discovers the steel within him, but he also discovers his debating skill, because for a long time he continues with a sort of a debate in print against this judge and his partiality and his uncivil behavior and all that, till they relent, the judge relents. And Dada Abdullah also tells him, hey, pipe down. We've got to work over here, kind of thing.
Tushar, this is followed by a pivotal incident.
Yes.
Gandhi recommends an out-of-court settlement to the case and starts for Pretoria to facilitate it. What was this incident and how did it change Gandhi?
On studying the whole case, Gandhi discovers that by fighting this case, it was a dispute between two cousins who were partners in a business. And what Gandhi discovers is that the lawyers hired by both of the cousins were the ones who were extending the dispute for monetary gains. And so he sits them down and talks to them in Kathiawadi and says, "Kya shu karo છો તમે? બે બિલાડીના ઝઘડામાં વાંદરો રોટલી ખાઈ જાય."
You should translate that.
So he says, what are you doing, In the fight between two cats, the monkey is stealing the bread. You sit down together, trash it out, there's no big deal. So finally, when they realized that they were being childish, the cousin said, but no, we need a face-saving exit. It shouldn't appear as if one person has lost and one person has won. So Gandhi says, that's it. Then I will work out a face-saving formula by which you can both claim victory. And so he said, takes a bit of time. But I'll have to go. I'll have to be the intermediary between the two. And so that entails that he has got to go to Pretoria. And he embarks on a journey that he doesn't know is going to turn historic and going to be a watershed in his own life. So he gets onto the train. Now he is the British trained barrister. So he says, I travel first class. I was surprised, but at that time there was a system by which he could acquire a ticket by mail order. So he has booked his first class ticket by mail order and received it. So he goes to the Durban station and boards a train going to Johannesburg, because that time there was no straight train to Pretoria. So you had to go by train, then you had to go by coach, and then you had to take another train, kind of thing. And he parks himself in the first class cabin. Initially there's nobody accompanying him, and then a white gentleman boards the train, and he's horrified to see a blackie sitting in the first class compartment. And so he goes and calls the guard, who's a Boer, and he comes and says, hey, you coolie, what are you doing in this coach? Gandhi just arrogantly takes out the ticket and says, I have a valid ticket, I'm traveling. So they said, no, you can't. No coolie is allowed to travel. And Gandhi said, no. And the guard says, don't be cheeky because there are no black lawyers in South Africa. And that famous dialogue of the film. In some ways, he must have said, he said, I'm a lawyer and I'm black, so there is at least one of us. And I've got a valid ticket, so I'm going. So he's picked up and thrown out of the train at Pietermaritzburg station. And that is something that shakes him up. He's scared of what is happening because he said they could have thrown me out on the tracks. I could have been killed. Then he's humiliated, he's angry about it. And he says, why do I have to take this? I've got a home, I've got a family. I'm going back. I'll go home. Then he's sitting out there shivering in the cold on the platform at Pietermaritzburg. I've been to that place.
I was going to ask you if you have, and if there is some
I've
sort
been
of a
to that
plaque or
place, and
memorial.
it was very funny because I was with a group of Americans who were traveling with me and my father to see the spots associated with Bapu in South Africa. And so we decided to take this train journey from Durban to Pietermaritzburg to experience it. And I said, if you guys pay me $50 a piece, I'll throw you, each one of you, out of the train at Pietermaritzburg station so you get an experience of what Bapu had. And there's a plaque on that platform. There's a plaque commemorating that event. Now the government of India has built a statue of it, a monstrous statue, but there's a statue of Bapu on the Pietermaritzburg station platform. They've made a big memorial, and every year on that date they have a event on the platform. It's beautiful, but Bapu spent the entire night sitting on the spot till he was told that he could go into the waiting room and sit in there. Now they've turned that waiting room into a museum with photographs and things. At one point of time, I don't know when it must have happened, but the thought came to him that, I have a home back in India, I have a family, I have the escape route, I can go back. But thousands of my fellow country people who are forced to live over here, they don't have any recourse. They have to face this humiliation day in and day out. So is it right for me to, just run away? Or should I fight? Now, there is that rankling thought that I wasn't able to fight for my honor in India when I was humiliated first. So I think that is what triggers the point. We've forgotten the instance in India, the humiliation in India, and we think it was Pietermaritzburg station where he was thrown out and suddenly the leader in him awakened. But I think this whole process has to be understood to realize how that happened. It was forming up. He was humiliated in India. The judge was rude to him in Durban. He was feeling discontent. He's saying, how can there be fair play if they are going to victimize me just on the basis of the color of my skin? And so I think at one point of time at Pietermaritzburg, he says, no, I'm going to stay the course over here. And then the Pietermaritzburg station has been so hyped, station episode has been so hyped, that it's forgotten that the trauma continues on his journey to Johannesburg too.
And Tushar, this incident is what Gandhi describes as the most creative experience of his life. The inner struggle as he sits shivering in the waiting room, my active non-violence began from that day, he said.
And I think, Bapu throughout his life talked about his inner voice. He talked about how he used to hear his inner voice speak to him and counsel him, and many a times he discovered that was the real good advice that he got. And I think he realized that voice in that waiting room or on that platform that night in Pietermaritzburg, because something traumatic is needed to trigger that transformation. And I think that instant was the trigger for him to realize that there was an inner voice that he could listen to, that counseled him, that told him what to do. And then henceforth, he keeps mentioning that counsel of the inner voice throughout his lifetime. I think that conversation began at Pietermaritzburg station.
Tushar, the ordeal doesn't end there. The next day, he purchases a ticket to Johannesburg, which includes a stagecoach ride. And as he gets in, he is again assaulted by a white man, and again, Gandhi decides to stick to non-violence.
Yes, he purchases a ticket on the coach and sits inside the coach, and then a white man comes and he refuses to sit on the same bench as a coolie. And so he goes and complains to the coachman, and the coachman comes again and as rudely says, "Hey, you coolie, get out of the coach." And Gandhi says, "I'm not getting out of the coach. I paid for it. I'm going to sit over here." And then he is brutally assaulted. He's pulled out of the coach and he's beaten up, and then he's not only made to sit in the place that the coachman sits, but at his feet. And under every pretext, the coachman kicks him and shoves him and pummels him and abuses him throughout that journey. And Gandhi is hanging on to his life because, if he falls, he's going to come under the wheels or the hoofs of the horses. And he's clinging on and he's being pummeled and he's being abused. And then still a couple in the coach take pity and they reprimand the coachman and take Bapu and ask him to sit inside the cabin. And, all this adds to his indignation, because till then he has always believed that the British are very gentlemanly and they believe in fair play and, like the famous thing, when you cheat, the British have this habit of saying that's not cricket. And so all these practices are not cricket for the British, and yet they are happening. So that breaking down of a certain image that he has formed of the British doesn't happen totally, but the cracks are slowly starting to appear.
Now at Johannesburg, Gandhi purchases a first-class ticket to Pretoria, and again a guard asks him to get out.
He faces it everywhere. He's made to get out of trains, he's sneered at, he's pushed off the sidewalks. He goes to hotels where he has booked remotely, and suddenly the clerk or the manager comes and says, "Oh sir, but we just, all the rooms got sold out, we don't have a room for him, for you." And then a white man walks in and the guard obligingly hands over a key, making it very apparent that the hotel doesn't want a coolie to stay in its hotel. He goes to a barber shop for a haircut, and the barber snootily refuses. He said, "I don't cut coolie hair." And so at every instant he experiences that racist prejudice in South African society.
Cut to June 1894. The Dada Abdullah case is over and Gandhi has returned to Durban and is preparing to return home. But Dada says he wants to arrange a send-off to which all leading Indians are invited. That day, Gandhi spots a report in a newspaper about quote-unquote Indian franchise. What is that all about, and what was the justification offered for the law of that name?
See, the thing is that slowly South Africa is turning into a racist community. There is simmering dispute between the Boers and the British, and in that dispute the Asians are sort of being ground between the two. And so legislations are being brought in that are prejudicial. And it's like, the abrogation of Article 370 in India. The pretext is we want to rationalize everything. We don't want special statuses and favors and all that. But the subtext is that we want to put the Muslim in its place, in their place over there. Similarly, very inoffensive or hostile acts are being brought in to keep the coolies in their place. Because, see, the white South Africans are not even considering the Africans as human beings. So they don't need laws, if they become too offensive, we just go shoot them. But for Asians, we need to control them by law. And so one law or the other is being brought in to curb, to deny them freedom, to restrict them to certain places, to prevent them from getting their families as a right. two things. Because till this time, the only Indians who have been brought in are the indentured laborers who are required to work on their farms and work in their mines and things. And then the second wave is of support for those communities so that they don't tax the white infrastructure. So the merchant class has been. But now, because of the industriousness of the Indians and the Asians, not only Indians but Asians in particular, is threatening the white, because the Indian merchants are monopolizing all the Asian trade and making nice money out of it. They're also encroaching on the reservation trade, the blacks trading with the blacks and things. They're poaching on the hunters and gatherers of the the white explorers. They are coming out of the jungles with ivory and pelts and all that, and the Indian merchant is giving them the best rates to sell. So there is resentment, jealousy coming in, and so they said, okay, we've got the power of legislating, we're going to start putting the screws, tightening the screws on you. And so the Asian Franchise Bill and later on the Registration Act and all that. And the smart lawyer that Gandhi is, he says, this sounds very harmless, but do you remember, do you understand that this actually is the beginning of disenfranchising you totally and making it legal to just throw you? They threw me out of the train. They'll make it that legal to throw you out of the country. So you got to be careful. So he just casually mentions it, the community. He says, do you know the danger of the franchise bill? The guy said, oh, what franchise bill यार? ऐसा तो बहुत होता है. हम तो ऐसे ही जीते हैं. He says, you got to be careful. One fine day they're going to come and throw you out of the country, of home and hearth and everything you've built. That's when the community wakes up and says, what are you talking about? He says, this is the ramification. If this bill is passed, you can be declared stateless, you can be declared without any rights, and you can be chucked out of this country at the whim of anyone. He said, what do you mean by that? And then they say, if you know all these things, then you're the best guy to fight. So don't go.
And how did Gandhi react to that request?
Well, he said, you see, one of the things you must remember, although he's stayed one whole year and worked for Dada Abdullah, the money he has earned is not enough to pay back the debt. The debt back home is much larger. And so he needs to earn. And now he has now got the confidence of practicing law. He's broken out of his timidity, that fright of the judge and the courtroom is gone. And so he says, but then I have to earn. And he says, I refuse to make money out of community service. So I'll do all the community service for free. Then how am I going to earn money and support my family? So the community says, okay, we'll ensure that you have enough practice to support your family and things. So he says, okay, in that case, I'll stay back. And he stays back. Kastur, back home, is eagerly waiting to welcome her husband back. And just a few days before he's due to come back, the letter comes and says, no, I'm staying back. I've got work. She's sad, but she's also happy, because at the back of her head, she's also wondering that once he comes back from South Africa, what is he going to earn? How are we going to pay back the debt? And now she said, oh, maybe he'll send some money, he'll make some earnings and send some money, and we'll pay back the debt.
And this comes on the back of a string of failures in his legal practice. So how did Gandhi and the others in the community gear up to fight the franchise bill?
Well, one of the things that Bapu did was he was a litigating activist. So he would challenge everything that was challengeable, he would challenge in the courts. He would find the legal route, he would argue, he would create public opinion using newspapers. He started discovering his ability to write, and he used to regularly be published in the colonial papers. Slowly his reputation reached London, and what he wrote about was started getting published in London, English papers also. And so he was gaining a reputation. So he used all those things. He used to write to the British Parliament. He used to lobby with parliamentarians. He used to even write to the Viceroy of India and said, "You are the head of the Indian people, and your people are being unjustly treated in your colony. So you've got to work for us." And he started strategizing. All his, it was not just the mobilization of people in the country or that group. He used to use every avenue to create opinion against what he thought was unjust. And he continued to appeal to his belief of the sense of fair play of the British, saying some fine day, one fine day your soul will awaken, no? And your greed will diminish. You'll have to acknowledge us. So I'm going to keep doing that. So if you look at it, although all his fights were political in nature, they had a common thread. If you were to say it in Hindi, he said, "तुम माई बाप हो, तो माई बाप की तरह treat करो. We don't mind being called your subjects. We don't mind being called your protected ones. But then behave as our patron, fairly and equally and justly." So what he was fighting for in every issue, whether it was the franchise bill, whether it was the tax bill, whether it was the registration bill, was what he was fighting was dignity. Don't treat us like slaves. Treat us as human beings. Treat us as subjects on a fair and equal basis, and treat us justly. So if you look at the entire fight, what came to be known as Satyagraha in South Africa, was so many different issues on which he launched agitations. But the common thread was dignity, pride, fair play, and justice.
But despite everything, the bill is passed.
Yes.
Now, how do the Indians and Gandhi's colleagues protest against it? And also, the battle shifts to England, doesn't it?
It shifts to England. That's what I said. He used to go to London. He used to go to England. He would lobby there. He would write to the members of parliament. He would write to the secretary of the colonies. He would write to the Indian viceroy. He wrote everywhere. He became a compulsive correspondent. He kept writing to everybody. Public meetings happened. He wrote editorials in South African newspapers, creating this thing. He used to go to churches on Sundays to speak to the community and Sunday sermons. There were a few friends of his who were white clergy who would give him access. So he would utilize that also and talk about the injustice being done to Asians and remind them that, we are human beings. Don't treat us as animals. That's where he has become open to criticism today, where the African activists say he was a racist, he didn't care for Africans. What they don't understand is he never claimed to be a universal leader. In South Africa, he said, "I'm the leader. I am fighting for the cause of my fellow countrymen," and extended to my continental fellows. So he took up cases of the Asians. He didn't claim that I am going to fight for the rights of everyone. He had great friends with leaders of the African community, and he interacted with them. But he didn't say, "No, I'm a bigger leader than you." And that's why the accusation that he didn't fight for the Africans is unjust. Because he never claimed in his entire stay in South Africa saying that I was a universal leader. He said, I am fighting for my fellow brothers and sisters. And we must give him that freedom to express his limitations. And saying there's already a bunch of African leaders, why do I need to impose myself on the community?
Now, a final petition was submitted to England, and Gandhi wrote to Dadabhai Navroji, who was helping the cause in England, that the bill was meant to, and I quote, "put the Indians under such disabilities and subject them to such insults that it may not be worth their while to stop in the colony. Stop quote. He went on to say that the South African regime does not want to do away with Indians altogether either because they want them there as indentured labor. By then, it was again time for Gandhi to go back to India. Again, he was held back. And this was a unique moment because while Gandhi was happy to do the public service, his conscience also could not allow him something most of us would consider basic. You mentioned the fee. How did that all pan out?
Well, he had this thing. He also wanted to be with his family. He wanted, and he felt that he had done whatever he could for nations. You must remember, he was a pragmatic guy, so he did not expect that he was going to win a spectacular victory against the crown. Now, in South Africa, there was this whole jumble of colonies. So, some regions of South Africa were British colonies, some regions were Boer colonies, Dutch colonies, and there were different populations staying over there. Administrations were different, and they were inimical to one another. But Asians were staying everywhere because they were being used as farm labor and things, and they were being persecuted by all of them because the white races thought they were the master races, superior races, and so they were ill-treating them. So the fights were also regionally specific, and that's where he says that they don't want us here, but they don't also want to do away. And when he says it will be difficult for us to stop over in the colony, what he meant was, if we have to go back to India or come to South Africa, you have to get in at Durban, which is the British colony. But most of the work is in Transvaal, which is a Dutch colony. And transiting between the two will become difficult. How do you expect us to reach the port if one colony has a different set of laws and things? So he's thinking far ahead of the problem. He's thinking about the ramifications, what will happen, how will the families settle, where will they settle, if the laws are so fluid that, because it was all building up to segregation. It was all building up to saying, okay, these are the areas you can sit in, the group areas, which became the hallmark of apartheid South Africa, where they would declare this part is Asian part, this part is white part, this part is African part. And the three races could not go. The whites could go everywhere, but the other two had to be restricted within their own areas. And the seeds were being sowed in all the legislations that were happening at that time in the colonies. And so he had a remarkable sense of perception of what this would lead up to. And so when nobody was thinking of it, he was warning against it. And that's where also he found it difficult, because people say, what are you talking about here? This is not happening. But he'd say, it's leading up to this 5 or 10 years down the line. So start working against it right now. That is where he started. He never worked for the crisis. He started planning for it much earlier and say, let me prevent it, kind of thing. That was the difference between the conventional leaders and his leadership. That he never sat at home and waited for the crisis to blow up and then jump into the fire with a bucket of water. He identified the spark, and he said, if I don't douse that spark, it's going to turn into an inferno. And so he started working on that. And so his opponents also felt, why is this guy making an issue out of a molehill? And they got irritated also that why does he detect our intentions so early, even before we imagine them? He's preempting us. So at one point his fight became difficult. On the other point, his fight became easy because he did not allow it to become a critical issue.
I think when you talk about foresight, actually it seemed as if Indians across South Africa were a target. So there were franchise issues brewing in the Cape, in Zululand, and in the Charter Territories.
Everywhere. It was universal because all of them were racist regimes and who believed in who worked for the benefit of their own races. And so It was in different avatars. It was there in all the colonies, all the regions.
Was this also a time of internal struggle for Gandhi when it came to non violence? It would have been a time of extreme pressure, and the desire to let loose this anger would have been there.
That was also one of the points, but also his spiritual rooting had, in one way, he had come to terms with the fact that physically he was weak. But through his own traumas, you must remember, he's had brutal experiences before this. He's been shoved off pavements, he's been thrown out of trains, he's been kicked and pummeled and all that. And he discovers that physically he lacks the strength to retaliate. But morally he has the strength to withstand that abuse. And internally he discovers that that is the thing that is giving all the insults. There are so many insults. The judge insulted him on the second, third day of his arrival in South Africa. After that, there were so many insults that he had to weather. And to be able to continue and go on would have taken a lot of moral courage and strength. And the realization would have come that this is what is helping me. This is what is required. And that is where he starts talking about soul force. And the other term for soul force is non-violence. Where he used to very well say that the most effective use of non-violence is when you make the other person understand that I can be violent, but I choose to be non-violent. So be careful.
This would have been a tough time to be non violent because it was a charged atmosphere. The Natal whites, especially, were being worked into a frenzy by those who supported the bill. Now, I read some of the language used to support the bill, and it included stuff like Indians do not enjoy the franchise in India, the Indian in South Africa represented the scum of India, Indians did not understand what the franchise was, the colony must remain a white man's country, and there's a lot more stuff in that vein.
It's like the frenzy that we see these days, where not only in India but everywhere, where this kind of fear mongering is being done, that we're being overwhelmed, we'll get into a minority status, or in Britain the immigrants will swamp us, or in America, all the scum of the earth is coming to America and all that. This has been a common human trait since historic times. The easiest way to foment prejudice, anger, resentment, and then a backlash. And that was being done in South Africa too. So, because they couldn't intellectually counter Gandhi, the slander began, and the community began to be targeted. And so you see all these kind of things, and if you look at it, it wasn't a general trend, but a motivated bunch of politicians who discovered that this could become our pathway to power, who were doing this. And they were all people who could not intellectually counter the other person's arguments, who were resorting to this mob frenzy kind of whipping up a mob frenzy.
And so, what happened to the franchise bill eventually? And the provisions are described by Pyarelal ji, or at least he seems to imply that they were actually a victory for the Indians.
The victory was in the sense that they forced the most contentious provisions to be watered down. It wasn't a victory in the sense that it was completely scrapped. One of the victories was that they couldn't push it through with the kind of impunity that they wished to. It went to and fro, because at that time colonies had to send their proposed bills to London for the British Parliament to endorse it, and then the king or queen to endorse it. And so the process was long. And what happened was that because of this campaign that was being carried out, a lot of sympathy was generated back home in London. And so if the bill was pushed through by the African colonies, When it went to London, public opinion started mattering, and it took time. It wasn't easy for them to pass it. And so that was a moral victory. But finally, these laws were passed in a more acceptable form or in a watered down form. So it wasn't an absolute victory, but the victory was a moral victory, victory for the morale kind of thing. That yes, if we try, we can stop them from doing what they want.
And it also meant that all the colonies where Indians were settled, as Pyarilalji describes it, they awoke to the importance of their own position.
Yes. They realize the power that they wielded. Till then, they used to feel, oh, we are subjects, we can't do anything, we have to just accept our fate. This was the first time when they just go, oh, we matter. You know, it's like somebody who has been sitting and refusing to stand up, and you pull him up and say, look, you can stand. He says, oh, I can. Then I may be able to take a step. This is what happened, that belief that we have to suffer this is our fate. They are the master race. We have to accept whatever they do. No. If I don't want certain things, I can stop it. If I cannot prevent it, at least I can water it down. I can make them rethink. That belief that I can make the opponent rethink is the starting point of courage. The starting point of saying, don't take me for granted. Till then, nobody was doing that. Now suddenly they found a leader who was giving them the confidence that yes, Obama with his famous yes we can. Bapu never made it as a slogan, but that's what he convinced the Indians of that time. Yes, we can. Don't wait for others.
In our context.
Rahul's Daromat.
Rahul Gandhi is we're referring to. Tushar, this battle, it wasn't just a legal battle, it was political, it was social, and it was a turning point.
Yes.
As we read through Pyarilalji's chronicle, we can almost see Mohan fade away and Gandhi emerge. Gone is the nervous, lacking in confidence, failure of a man. Now what we have is a barrister, a statesman, a leader. Talk us through this change of personality.
It's very interestingly illustrated by the popular names that he was called. He was barrister M.K. Gandhi, who was a lawyer. Then he became the Girmitia lawyer because he started taking up cases of the indentured laborers. And in Hindi, indentured laborers started being called the agreement laborers. And agreement that got corrupted into Girmit. And so all these indentured laborers were known as Girmitias. So he started being called the Girmitia Vakil because he was taking up cases of these unfortunate people who were being ill-treated by their bosses or cheated by their bosses. And, there used to be a whole line of these indentured laborers begging him to take up their case. And he achieved a lot of success in it. And so there's this transformation. So he becomes a Girmitia lawyer. Then he becomes the leader. And slowly his popularity starting to be called as Gandhi Bhai. And with those name changes, the transformations are also happening. That in the elite circles is barrister Mohandas Gandhi or barrister M.K. Gandhi. Then amongst his professional things, he's the Girmitia lawyer. When he goes to the community leadership, he becomes Gandhi Bhai. So that's the journey that is evolving, which would one day finally endow the Mahatma, and suddenly he would become Mahatma to everybody.
Tushar, but there's also this persistence in viewing himself as a British subject first. Gandhi fights this battle while remaining steadfast that he's part of the empire. Now, I know that there was a Boer War at some stage, and also at some stage Kastur and the family comes to him in South Africa. And we've talked about that before. But what I do want to talk about is this persistence of viewing himself as a British subject. And we see that during the Zulu War also, when he forms the ambulance corps to help the wounded, but it's also to show his loyalty to the empire.
His strategy is in constantly reminding the empire that we are your loyal subjects, but you are not being fair to us. So he works to create that image of a very loyal subject of the empire. And then he keeps pointing out and saying, look, we did our duty, we helped you whenever you required. Are you reciprocating? Are you treating us fairly? You go around the world saying how fair you are, how just you are. Look at yourselves, how you're treating us. While we are performing all the duties that a loyal subject, a loyal citizen is supposed to perform. But we're not getting anything in return. So he's also constantly appealing to the collective morality. He says, even if you have smothered it, I'm going to keep making an attempt to awaken it in you. See, right from South Africa, he is always trying to transform his opponent, not vanquish his opponent. He says, I know there is a goodness in you, and I'm going to work on it till it overwhelms you, and the evilness that you're treating me with is completely obliterated. And that is the moral strategy of nonviolence.
As I researched this series, it struck me that the Indian franchise bill, by changing Gandhi, is of great relevance to India too. If that battle had not been fought, maybe there would have been no Gandhi as we understand him today.
Definitely no Gandhi as in the public leader, the leader of the masses, the political leader. There would have been a different version of Gandhi, maybe as a activist lawyer. He might have confined himself to fighting battles in court or in the print media, which was the most powerful influencer of that time. We may not have seen him as the mass leader. The franchise bill and the movement of that time was what started the transformation. And that's where, when Nelson Mandela came to India, he very cheekily wrote that India sent us a barrister, we sent back Mahatma. The transformation, it was a very telling statement, and that's what happened. That India sent a barrister to South Africa to serve over there. 22 years later, a man who would eventually become the father of the nation was returned to us.
Sticking to the franchise bill, now today we have the rumblings of a similar sentiment in India. There are various forces suggesting Muslims and other minorities should be disenfranchised. Others want their citizenship revoked through the National Register of Citizens. And now this seems like an eerie case of history repeating itself, only in a different country.
It is, at a different time in a different country. But you see, the thing is, we must remember the mentality remains the same. The mentality of subjugating people, the mentality of discriminating against people has remained unchanged. So the basic qualities, if we can call them qualities, are constant. It's just the appearance, the outward appearance that is changing. The cornerstone of the Indian franchise bill, was to subjugate a people. CAA, NRC in India attempt to do the same thing. And that is where the response has also to be in a similar way. And very admirably, the protests against CAA, NRC, the way they were done, they put the government on the back foot. And even today, they hesitate to implement them in the way that they had envisaged them. It's because the protests were something that intimidated them. They were not riots, they were not arson, they were not no looting, but the defiance that was shown. And the government was forced to sabotage the movement in an immoral way by fomenting riots and violence and things. And so that effectiveness of the tools that Bapu used in South Africa is still that potent and vital. You look at the farmers' protest.
Absolutely, yeah. Shaheen Bagh.
Shaheen Bagh, the farmers' protest after that, for 1 year, the defiance that they showed.
And at least in the case of the farmer bills, all three bills were revoked
Yeah.
in the end. Tushar, there's also the realization that seemingly all powerful regimes and individuals can be defeated, can be cut to size through constitutional, non violent ways. We talked about Shaheen Bagh, we talked about the farmers' protests. We've seen something like that in the last Lok Sabha election results also.
Yes, it is. This is the spirit that needs to be awakened of the people. What I said right in the beginning of this episode. I said a person who thinks that they are, lame and incapable of standing up. They just need to be given the confidence to break that thought process, and that one push or pull to get them on their feet. And then they discover that, oh, I can stand and I can walk. And then they start running. And that's how revolution happens. And this Lok Sabha, till this Lok Sabha, it was, who but Modi? This Lok Sabha election, the answer given was, even if he comes back, he needs to come back on our terms. He can't take us for granted. So somebody who started the election with the boast of 400 par had to eat crow with just 240. And that is the power of a democracy, of the people. They're saying, okay, we may not have an alternative to you as yet, but that doesn't make you indispensable. Remember that.
And I think this was...
This is exactly what Bapu also was doing to his people in that time. Because at that time, see, everybody, all the subjects of the British Empire thought they are invincible. Whatever they do is ordained. They are blessed to do that, and we are condemned to suffer that. What Bapu started off with is, no, they are humans. They've got to behave in a code that we all have to. And if they don't, then they can be pushed back. And he didn't talk about vanquishing them. The final thrust he announced was in 1942, where he said, now we don't want you, get out of here, chale jao. Till then, he said, be just, be fair, treat us equally with dignity. So the transformations are happening slowly.
Speaking of transformations, any political transformations that you witnessed in recent times that remind you of Gandhi's coming of age?
I think if I were to talk about this, two things that I think is that the belief in democracy amongst the Indians, the belief in democracy in America, the belief in democracy and people's power in England. I see that transformation happening. The belief shown in the defiance of the continuing agitations in Israel against Netanyahu show us that people have started realizing their potential in a democracy, their ability. And we were in a period of time where people said, oh, at the most we can just vote. We can't do anything beyond that. But that is changing. People are saying, even with my vote, I can bring about a change.
Yeah, and I think this is also happening at a time of great institutional failure.
Yeah.
Many of our institutions, which work very well, have not been working well enough. Our justice system, for example, the election commission, for example.
Yeah, what we were taught were pillars of democracy have proven to be not worthy of being known as that, have proven to be frail, have proven to be not of the consequences that they should have been, unfortunately for us. But I think what has happened is we've allowed them to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, and what I'm trying to say also is that the recent Lok Sabha election results have happened despite these institutional failures.
Yeah.
And if these institutions had been working properly, perhaps it could have been an even more dramatic result.
Right. The ADR report released recently suggests a spectacular stealing of this of this election.
Yeah.
And if that report is to be believed, and if that had been fair, then it would have been history for Modi. But that was also what was being done in the colonies at that time. You see, we consider that in the colony they had a democratic government. But they were making laws for Indians, Asians, everybody. But the whites were electing them. The Asians and the Indians had no say in that. But the same people who refused to give the franchise were making laws for them that would govern their fate. So that basic violation was happening over there.
Tushar, I think one of the great triumphs of Gandhi's franchise bill battle was that he was able to carry everyone along. Remember, the Indians were not a homogeneous group in South Africa. There were several religions, castes, economic inequalities. Surely we need something like that today too.
See, the thing is that the only way democracy can be strengthened is by unity. And today we see how democracy is being weakened because we are being divided on every possible division in the society: language, region, economics, caste, gender, religion. Every difference that you can point out is being utilized to create a division.
Even
Food choices, even subcastes, even languages, dialects, we're divided on. And so division is the greatest strength to weaken democracy, and unity is the greatest strength of a democratic institution, and that is what Bapu realized in South Africa. And he said, I need a glue to bring all these people together, and said, the law is going to affect you no matter what your religion, what your caste, what your economic status. You're all going to be discriminated against in a similar manner. So if you want to fight it, forget about these divisions amongst you. Don't be disunited. Come together, fight. Otherwise, there were Tamils, there were Biharis, there were UPians, there were Muslims, there were Hindus. Most of the Hindus were scheduled castes who were running away from India to escape the caste system and were implementing the caste system in South Africa again. The Tambrams were the elite in South Africa. And so Bapu said, we are all being persecuted, no matter who we are. Why do you want to remain separate? And that is where he didn't have a Brahmin National Congress. He didn't have a Muslim National Congress. The political party that he formed, I can't call it a political party, it was a activist party, was the Indian National Congress. It had no religious identity, it had no caste identity, it had no racial identity. It was the Indian National Congress. He said, unite under that banner, that will be your strength. And it lasted way beyond Bapu in South Africa.
And in those Gandhi years in South Africa, is there a lesson for the politicians of today in India?
I think the South Africa phase of Bapu's life is a textbook case for any aspiring politician anywhere. And especially in a country like India where the disparities are so huge. I think if political science was really to be taught, the South Africa phase would be the ideal textbook for that.
Tushar, as I was doing my research, as it happens every year, I struggled because every piece of information, every story seemed like it should find a place in this series. My biggest challenge was what to leave out. And trust me, I have left out truckloads. We owe a massive debt of gratitude to Pyalaji, who chronicled Gandhi's life in painstaking detail and unbelievable scale. This series, you'll be surprised to know, is derived from a roughly 400 pages long section of the first volume of the biography. This volume is well over 700 pages long, and even within this limited section, I've struggled to include everything. That's the level of detail. The entire biography comprises 11 volumes, 5 of them written by Sushila Nair, Dayalaji's sister and a lifelong follower of Gandhi's. She was a key member of his inner circle and his personal physician. She went on to play a leading role in public health, medical education, and social and rural reconstruction in India. If I were to have based a series on just volume 1, it would have taken us maybe 10 or more episodes just to cover the most important events and thoughts. Imagine then the treasure trove that is the 11 volume set. Maybe over the course of several years, we'll be able to do justice. Every year, we choose a theme for our Gandhi series, but the objective always is to uncover the man. We don't want to turn Gandhi into a superhero or demigod, but to truly understand him once and all. The last thing we wish to claim is that he was flawless or did everything right. He was a human being, and so he exhibited human traits, but he was extraordinary. And we wish to understand what made him so. And through that, we hope to understand what he meant not just to the birth of free India, but also why he continues to shape the discourse and remain relevant 76 years after he was killed. In his beginning, we believe, lies the answer to that. With that, we come to the end of this All Indians Matter in-depth special series, Gandhi The Beginning. Tushar, we owe you too a debt of gratitude for being there, for making specials possible every year, for opening your heart and soul to us and to the listeners. Thank you.
Thanks, Ashraf.
If you like what you heard, please follow this podcast and share this episode with your friends and family.